1/4 of a mile, slide right onto Causeway, A312. Take the next right onto Causeway, A312. Continue on A312 for 1 mile.
Or Labour, and that's been declining. Those figures have been declining for more than half a century. Then you had the MP's expenses scandal 12, 13 years ago. That knocked the reputation of politicians for 6. So things been happening more recently. Perhaps we'll come on to that. But we shouldn't think that this is a sudden phenomenon. It's something that's been going on for decades.
What are the consequences, do you think, if people do, for whatever reason, think that politics is not something that affects them? Not that it doesn't affect them, but that they have not enough knowledge or interest, and that it's a distant part of their lives?
I think the big thing is this, Eddie. If you have some trust in your politicians, if they take decisions which you don't terribly like, but you feel they've taken those decisions for the right reasons in the national interest, you're much more likely to accept those decisions than if you think they've been taken for self-serving or partisan reasons. And so I think at the moment, whether you take what's been happening on Europe or on vaccines and the pandemic, people who don't like what's going on, they pour scorn on the politicians. You very seldom hear. It'd be interesting if your listeners come in and say, actually, I disagree with what the government is doing, or the Labour Party is saying on Europe or on vaccines, but I respect them for what they are saying and doing. You don't get that respect from people you disagree with to the same extent now that you would have done half a century ago.
Peter, thank you. Peter Kellner, former president of YouGov, political commentator. Ben Kentish is here. Ben Summerschool, what is your question about how it all works? Here is Mark in Blenchley. Hello, Mark. What do you want to know?
Evening, Eddie. Evening, Ben.
Evening, Mark.
It's an unusual one, I suppose. I've got to the age of 63, and I keep hearing the phrase spin doctors. Now, I thought, shall I ask someone? And then they'll look at me sort of blank. So I thought, as you're giving us the opportunity, here's the question. What are spin doctors? I don't think they're a music group anyway.
No, they are.
They should be.
That's a great
question, Mark.
Thank
Really,
you, Mark.
You're right. It's one of those phrases that you talk about a lot. Spin doctors is effectively a sort of slang term for people who do communications for generally political parties. Could be the government. It could be any sort of political organisation. They have press officers whose job it is to deal with the media, to answer questions, but also to try to make sure that their version of events is put across to the media and covered the way they would like it in in the media. Now, obviously, that's often not successful, but this phrase spin doctor generally is used, and it's not always used in a sort of complimentary way to refer to anybody who...
In 200 yards, at Wagoners Roundabout, take the second exit onto the Parkway, A312.
Who was Tony Blair's head of communications, people who work in politics, whose job is effectively what's sort of pejoratively termed spin. Spin being the art of trying to put your take to spin a certain event or a certain thing that's going on in politics in the way that you would like it. That's what spin is. Spin doctors are the people who do the spinning. So one example, for example, of typical spin where you might see a spin doctor working there at magic or otherwise would be after a debate, say in a general election campaign where they have a big debate and then all the party spin doctors get to work and they say our party won for these reasons and our the opposing party lost for all these reasons, and did you notice how great our candidate was when he said this and this, and here's some facts you really should mention in your reporting because they weren't covered in the debate but they really paint our party in a positive light. That's the art of spin. The people doing those jobs, people doing that job, working for generally a party, but could be a government department, could be any organisation, they are the spin doctors.
Mark, does that help?
Yes, it does. It's great because you think they're looking at things from a different. Each spin doctor would look at it from a different way, wouldn't they? I imagine.
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway. Continue on the Parkway for 1 mile.
Well, I'm glad we were able to help, Mark. Thank you for asking the question. Alison in Rochester says, what does left wing mean and right wing mean? And how do you know which is which?
It's a really, really good question. It actually derives, Eddie, the terms left and right wing from the French Revolution. It's based on where the different people would sit in the French Revolutionary Parliament. Right wing typically associated with what we call conservative, small c conservative views, generally characterised as more resistant to change, more believing in traditions and historic institutions, and a bit sceptical perhaps of sort of big drastic change. That's how you probably define small c conservative. Left wing can mean a bit more open to things changing, can be quite radical. You could be a left-wing communist or a Marxist who wants the whole of society changed or overthrown. So those are very broad brush. A lot of people think that they are actually outdated, the terms left-wing and right-wing, because they don't really fit as well as they used to. The ideologies, the beliefs, the mindsets that people have, and it's getting harder and harder to box people in. So yes, they're used a lot. They are still, I would say, quite useful, very broad brush terms, but they really don't capture the nuance and the subtleties and the difficulties, the tensions within politics in a way that perhaps they used to. So they are becoming quite outdated.
This question says, why do ministers head up departments that they've got no prior experience in running? For example, Mr. Javid as health minister, Johnson as foreign secretary, Priti Patel as home secretary.
In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the second exit onto the M4 slip road to Heathrow Airport, M25.
The people who lead government departments are elected. They are elected by the public. The Prime Minister of the party that has the most MPs then has all those MPs to choose from, and they will decide which ones are what we call backbenchers, i.e. they sit on the lower, further backbenches in the House of Commons. They're not government ministers, they don't have a government job, they are just MPs, and which ones are ministers, and the senior ministers, the cabinet ministers, are the ones that run the departments and they manage teams of other ministers. So in this country we have a system whereby the people who run government departments almost always, sometimes they're laws, but almost always, Eddie, are elected MPs, and that means the Prime Minister of the day doesn't have reams of experts from all sorts of different professions to choose from. They only have what could be just a few hundred people in front of them who have been elected by the British public. Now there is a wider question about whether the people who end up as MPs
Exit the roundabout onto the slip road.
experts. Do we want more people?
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
Some people say current MPs too derived from people who have had their career in politics, and that's partly the suggestion. And what others would say is no, the House of Commons is rightly elected. The expertise comes from two other places. It comes from the House of Lords, where people are appointed supposedly because of their expertise, and it also comes from the civil
M4 for 3 miles.
03456060973. You can text 84850. 6:31 tip as the headlines.
The head of the Met Police says her officers will review allegations made against Jeffrey Epstein after twice previously deciding there were grounds for investigation. He's a former friend of the Duke of York. This week, America's US accused Prince Andrew of sexual assault, something he strongly denies. The Taliban has taken control of the 10th provincial capital, what has been a week of significant gains in Afghanistan. The city of Ghazni is the latest to fall into their hands, with suggestions the capital, Kabul, would fall within 90 days. Team GB could lose their men's 100-meter relay silver from Tokyo. Sprinter CJ Ujah, who was part of the team, is testing positive for 2 banned substances, all now being investigated. LBC Business Update.
With Direct Line Landlord Insurance. Come direct from Landlord Insurance.
KFC has warned of changes to their menu after being hit by supply issues across the UK. The fast food chains released a statement saying some items won't be available and its packaging will look different. The firm says it's working hard to minimise disruption and thank customers for their understanding. The weather showers continuing in the northwest tonight, mainly dry elsewhere with isolated showers and a low of 10. LBC. Your home is your sanctuary, your safe space, your retreat from the rest of this crazy world. You only let people into your home who you trust. Trust a trader. Understand this. That's why our tradespeople are all reliable, reputable, and recommended. And before you book someone, you can discuss the job with them and read their reviews, giving you that assurance that you and your home are in safe hands. You can always trust a trader. I'm sorry, you have progressive memory loss.
When you hear these words, the outlook is bleak. But at Recognition Health, the brain and mind experts, we're working to change that. Volunteer for our clinical studies to receive free access to a new generation medication, as well as comprehensive medical screening. With your help, we can change the future of MCI and Alzheimer's disease.
You have progressive memory loss. But here's what we can do.
Go to brainandmindexperts.com.
Nothing. We're told it's not a good choice. Can't choose what present to get? How about nothing? Or what to call your newborn child? No, nothing doesn't go down well. Until now. Because Hyundai is giving you nothing. 0% APR available on the Kona Hybrid and Mild Hybrid. Choosing nothing could be the best decision you make. Search Hyundai Kona. Available until 30th of September. 0% over 24 months. Minimum 30% deposit. T&Cs apply. Hyundai Motor UK is a credit broker and not a lender.
Hi, I'm Zane, the customer service assistant for TfL. As you return to our network, let me remind you that you can travel safely because we're cleaning regularly with antiviral disinfectant, providing over 1,300
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
systems frequently circulate fresh air on our tubes, trains and buses. Please remember, you must wear a face covering over your nose and mouth at all times, unless you are exempt. To the Mayor of London, to TfL, every journey matters.
Keep right to stay on M4.
Get your business taxes right first time.
7 o'clock, we're going to reflect on the life of Eunice Stubbs, who has died at the age of 84. A presence on stage and screen for decades, well known to different generations of viewers. We'll talk about her before 7, as well as, of course, COVID 1 year ago. But Ben Kentish is here with Ben's Summer School. Everything he wanted to know about politics, but we're afraid to ask. Jerry is in Whitley Bay. Jerry, thanks for your patience. What's your question?
Hi, Eddie Ivor. The promulgation of Parliament 2019, my understanding of parliamentary procedure was that it was all of the law unless Parliament made it subject to the law. So I was a bit mystified when the Supreme Court was able to overturn the promulgation of Parliament. On what basis was that done?
That's a really good question. What the Supreme Court did isn't ruling necessarily against Parliament had decided. You're right to say Parliament in the UK, the sovereign has their higher power
1/4 mile, keep right to stay on M4.
Jerry, thank you. A text from Abdul in Altrincham who says, "Hi Ben, how do you decide which unnamed sources to quote and which to ignore? Why should we take them seriously if they won't stand by their comments?"
That's a really, really good question, Abdul. Lots of journalists, political journalists...
Keep right to stay on M4.
Unnamed sources is generally because someone might be giving you insight or some information that they're not authorised to disclose. So it might be someone who works in government who doesn't speak for the government, isn't authorised to say what they're saying to you. But it is still of interest, and it is newsworthy, and it is reliable. So when you come to, you speak to all sorts of sources, as you can imagine, all sorts of people who work in all sorts of places, how you decide and when to quote someone unnamed is generally, do they have a good reason for being unnamed? And that is generally because they are not authorised to be telling you what they are telling you. The first thing really that you ask is, are they a reliable source? Do you trust them? Are they privy to the information that they are giving you? Do you believe that they are speaking accurately? If someone simply tells you that they heard something from a mate who said this in a pub and someone else overheard it, that's not a reliable source. So you've got to be pretty confident, very confident that what they're saying is accurate and true. And the third thing, of course, you check, is it interesting? You know, you hear all sorts of information as a journalist that actually isn't particularly interesting, isn't particularly relevant, isn't really relevant to people's lives, and you probably therefore wouldn't quote it. But if all those three things, the first one, as I say, is the big one, are they a reliable source? If all those three criteria are met, then it is seen as a legitimate and actually a key part of political journalism to quote.
Here's Mike now in Beverley. Hi Mike, what do you want to know?
Hi, Ben. Could you explain to me how it is that when people are speaking in the House of Commons or Lords, sometimes they can filibuster and talk for hours and talk a bill out without being stopped, and other times when you watch them in Parliament, they've been given 3 or 4 minutes each. Who decides that and lets them give way?
That's a really, really good question. It all depends on the type of bill that is being debated at the time. So the only time that you can really filibuster a piece of legislation is if that legislation has been introduced by a backbench MP. So each year a certain number of backbench MPs have the opportunity to introduce new bills into the House of Commons that then get time to be debated and voted on on the floor of the House of Commons. And in those debates there is generally not a time limit. So one MP, if they really, really don't like the bill, can stand up and talk for, it could be 10 hours, there's all sorts of historic examples, in order to mean that there's simply not enough time in the day for that bill to be put to a vote in the House of Commons and therefore passed. It effectively just falls away. When you can't do that is when the legislation has been introduced by the government, because in those...
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
They, as you say, give a time limit of what's generally 2, 3, 4 minutes for most MPs, and they cannot go over that. If they go over that, the Speaker will stand up and frankly tell them, in what could be pretty blunt terms, to shut up. So that's impossible really to filibuster. The only times you can do it, we have seen quite a few cases of this in recent years, is what's called, is those bills that are introduced by MPs on the backbenches. They're not government ministers, and they are private members' bills. They're normally debated on Friday, and those are the ones that you can quite effectively, if you really want to, decide to filibuster.
We're getting quite a lot of questions along the same line, and I'll try and sort of summarise what the thrust of them is. And it's about calling other politicians liar in the House of Commons. People saying that Don Butler was chucked out for calling someone a liar, and in the view of some of our listeners, Boris Johnson is a liar, and yet he's allowed to stay. Now, I won't ask you to pass judgment on who's lying and who's not, but can you just explain how that happens?
It all depends, Eddie, on the rules that govern Parliament, which have just evolved over time. No one's ever sat down and said, here are the rules, really. Although there was someone called Erskine May who, I think it was a couple of years ago now, did sit down and write as best he could the current rules of how Parliament worked at that time. And that's effectively the Bible of parliamentary rules. And in that Bible, this is something that has evolved over many, many years that the Parliament has sat, there is what's called unparliamentary language. And unparliamentary language includes, to quote from this book called Erskine May, the
quarter of a mile, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
That is deemed to be unparliamentary language. This book says it should be treated with particular seriousness, and what effectively happens if unparliamentary language like that is used is the speaker who's in charge.
Exit at junction 6.
MP that's used it, you need to withdraw that. It's against the rules. Sometimes often they say, okay, I'm sorry, I withdraw it. If they don't,
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the third exit onto Tuns Lane, A355.
you know, it is quite a traditional, it's quite a, some might say, outdated way of doing things, but a lot of things about Parliament are outdated. That's what makes it the Parliament that it is, and one of those things are the pretty strict and pretty historic conventions about how MPs must behave in the chamber, including unparliamentary language.
It's Ben's Parliamentary Summer School. If you have a question for him, it's 0345 6060 973. And I promised I would do this. I think it's important people know. Ben is a beloved part of the LBC team. He's our Westminster correspondent. But from tomorrow, well, you're on the air presenting programmes every day for 10 days. Tell me what the plan is. Ben.
The plan is, Eddie, sorry, I was thinking about parliamentary language. I'm now fascinated. The plan is from tomorrow I will be covering 6 till 9 p.m, Saturday 1 till 4 p.m, and then next week we'll be covering for Ian Dale 7 till 10 p.m, Monday to Thursday.
So it's more than a week of you, and you've presented programmes before on LBC. How much are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it.
What do you like most about presenting as opposed to doing your day?
Exit the roundabout onto Tuns
I
Lane.
do these phone-ins and they're
Would you like to shut up then? Do you want to just do the next bit?
No, I'm good. I think I'll leave it to the pros.
Exactly. Well, that's Ben with his first one tomorrow night.
First one tomorrow night, 6 p.m.
All right. But Ben is still here. If you have a question, it's 0345 6060.
In a quarter of a mile, slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
The Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police says the force will again review its position on whether to investigate whether crimes were committed by Jeffrey Epstein in London. The Taliban's reported to be making even more gains in Afghanistan, with reports they've taken control of the third largest city. And Team GB faces losing one of its silver medals from Tokyo. The weather showers continuing in the northwest tonight, mainly dry elsewhere with isolated showers and a low of 10.
LBC Travel, I'm Dave Chorner. There are queues on the M24.
Slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
Junction 24, that's for Potters Bar, to junction 25 for the A10. An investigation. There are also some delays in Wembley because the Ealing Road remains closed. That's after a fire in a building earlier on. A lorry has broken down on the North Circular at Henley's Corner and is very slow on that.
Continue for 1.5 miles.
Severe delays on the Hammersmith and City line, and also severe delays on the Metropolitan line between Harrow on the Hill and Wembley Park.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Camilla Tominey.
As another migrant seeking a new life in Britain dies on the high seas, what will it take to solve the migrant crisis?
Camilla Tominey on LBC.
This summer, get a trusted 5-year British Gas warranty when you buy a new boiler. So if yours is making even more noise than your neighbour's yappy dog, now's a good time to do something about it. The boiler, that is, not the dog. Get a new energy-efficient boiler from British Gas. Spread the cost interest-free over 3 years and get £200 off when you book a quote by the 31st of August. Search British Gas New Boiler. Conditions apply. British Gas New Heating Limited is a credit broker and uses a panel of lenders.
Call Eddie Mayer 0345 6060 973 LBC.
When you own a small business, whether you're an IT consultant or selling flowers, your tech is your lifeline. Oh no!
Sorry, we lost you. You there?
Great. But with Direct Line Business Tech Essentials, we can get your stolen or damaged tech replaced in 24 hours from claim approval. Whether it's laptops, phones, or tablets, we're on it. Search Direct Line Business Insurance. Direct Line.
Cover and claim limits apply Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. except bank holidays. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Comfort eating, little treating. Let's face it, lockdown left many of us carrying some extra pounds. But now's the time to turn things around. So shop smarter, eat better, and move more. Small changes can make all the difference. And getting started is easier than you think. For help and support to lose weight, download the free NHS Weight Loss app.
Express Business Gold Card, the card that works harder for your business. Search Amex Business Gold. Terms apply. 18 plus, subject to approval. Annual fee £175, first year free. Basic card also available with no annual fee or benefits.
Thank you for doing your bit throughout the pandemic to help keep one another safe while shopping at Sainsbury's. Wearing a face covering is now a personal choice in England. To help keep our colleagues and customers safe, please continue to wear a face covering if you can while shopping in our stores. Thank you. From Sainsbury's.
Hi, I'm Zane, a customer service assistant for TfL. As you return to our network, let me remind you that you can travel safely because we're cleaning regularly with antiviral disinfectant, providing over 1,000 free hand sanitizer stations across the network, and our ventilation systems frequently circulate fresh air on our tubes, trains and buses. Please remember, you must wear a face covering over your nose and mouth at all times, unless you are exempt. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Winner.